Welcome to part 3 of Picture Day Mistakes, the Kitchen and the Yard. If you are responsible for marketing real estate in any way, this training will give you some great tools to help you judge whether the pictures you are about to post are going to bring in clients or repel those dollars to your competition. I'll link part 1 below in case you did not see that first. So now we're going to go to the next space and the importance of this next space. So we want to get you in the door. And once we've got you in the door, now we've got a very limited attention span of our buyer. So they're, oftentimes they're only going to look at the first few photos, and if nothing interests them, they're just going to swipe on to the next house. In fact, they look at 1,647 houses on average before they ever make their first offer. That's a lot of houses. So we very quickly want to get them to the ooh-ah wow factor of this particular house. In most cases, it's the kitchen. But if the backyard is killer and has a hot tub and a waterfall and beautiful landscaping and a hammock, we want to get them out there instead. So in this case, the kitchen's very nice, so we're going to go to the kitchen next, and that kind of works in with the flow of what we're doing. So this is the realtor's next picture. So a couple issues here is that we just couldn't back up enough to get the whole kitchen in the photo. But we've got some other things that could really use some attention that would help. We've got the crooked lines as usual. We've got a lot of clutter to compete with. And if we look in this, in the center at the back corner, we've got we're trying to sell, let's say, a $60,000 kitchen by putting a 98-cent roll of paper towel on the countertop. And I'm going to tell you, that is not helping to add value for your marketing image. So let's get rid of the extra things. In fact, my rule is you get 3 things on your countertop. So one can be something pretty, one can be something utilitarian like a coffee maker, and then something else. And that's it. Because countertop space sells, and people want countertop space and room to work and room to put their things. And so when there's 20 items on the countertops, it just we don't like it. It's not appealing. Our buyers are not are not intrigued by it. So the next step with this realtor, let me just say, he knows that I've already explained that when we use a wide angle lens, which we oftentimes do in real estate, we don't want it so wide that it starts to warp things and bubble them out. So we want to use a rectilinear type lens that keeps fairly straight lines. Cell phones, when you put it on the wide angle, on the full width, will end up warping those sides. But with any wide angle lens, even on my professional wide angle lens, in this case it's his cell phone, he had asked the question about why the outsides tend to look stretched out and kind of oddly wide. And I explained that, well, because from the very outside, that light has to come in sideways and then turn to fit inside the little opening of the lens. And so truly that light is getting bent on those outside edges. So anytime you have something close to the side of your camera lens when you're in a wide angle mode, that's going to tend to get very stretched out and warped and out of proportion. So this realtor, having learned that lesson, came in a little tighter and a little closer and only showed a portion of the refrigerator, which looks very in perspective to the rest of the kitchen now. So again, very good. We're making progress, right? Now, still a few things, lots of clutter on the refrigerator. Now, to his credit, we were in a guest home and we weren't doing this as an official photo shoot. But in the same sense, I did tell him, hey, let's prep this as if you were listing the house. And again, we've got paper towel and extra things showing in there. So we went on to the next lesson, and I said, now take your phone and turn it vertically. So most of the time, we always want to shoot all of our photos horizontally, especially if it's going to be listed online and on site. Like MLS sites and that, they show fuller size. But in this case, we put the phone on panorama mode, and that's going to take several pictures and stitch them together. But here's an important thing. You want to pretend that you're taking a pencil and putting it right in line with the lens that you're going to use. And as you take those pictures, you want to rotate it around that pencil without that pencil ever moving out of place. So you just want to rotate it around that teeny tiny axis so that the lens always stays in the exact same kind of 3D airspace. What typically happens when people take a panorama is they swing their camera around. And what this is doing is changing the angle. And remember how I said the edges get kind of warped and wide? So, on the right side of this particular first shot, things over here would look a lot wider and warped. And then by the time we get in the center for the next photo, now they're in proper perspective and the camera's trying to stitch those two things that are out of proportion, and you get a very warped, wonky kind of picture when you finish with it. So very important to rotate it on around the lens, because the lens is what we want to stay in place, and just rotate the camera as if it's on a, centered on a pencil that's stuck in the ground. So I took his camera then and did the same thing, and just to see if we could improve this photo a little bit. So this shows, see on the left, how wide that refrigerator is. Again, just from having a wide angle lens stretches that out. But again, for a cell phone photo, this is not bad. The only real issue here is that center cabinet in the back is a little keystone, kind of has a little fat bottom and a skinny top. And again, just inherent from trying to stitch several pictures together and rotate, not having perfectly vertical. But we're also now starting to see this granite countertop that flows over the side as a waterfall countertop edge. And again, that's a nice, high-end feature. So we want to show that off. And also, as you see, I lowered it down so I could get everything level. So again, all in all, for a cell phone photo, very usable for a marketing photo. And that photo is much, much bigger, because this represents 3 photos stitched together, but also because instead of having kind of the narrow height, we now have twice the height of the picture and then 3 times as wide. So we've really made this picture like 600 times bigger. So now we're starting to put this photo on par with the quality of a much bigger sensor professional type camera. And so the detail is going to be much more. You could blow the picture up bigger and so on. So again, the pros and cons, we're still going to get stretchy things on the left, and I'll show you how to address that here in a bit. But you get a much bigger image. Now this is with my professional camera. And so now again, we're really showing off this waterfall countertop and how that flows over the edge. So we want that to kind of dominate and get your attention leading in. We lowered down so we can start to see these lights underneath the cabinets. Again, people really like, hey, I've got a well-lit kitchen. I can see stuff, that's very valuable. And if you notice on the left, that refrigerator is still stretched out because it's on the left edge, and we've got a little bit of chair showing. So you'd want to, if you were going to keep this whole picture, you'd want to move, just take that chair and just move it out of your picture. If you had a portion of a flower or a plant, partly in the picture, decide if you want it in or out of the picture and just take it out altogether. So in this case, I did this, the normal way to show that extra width, but knowing, for kind of a training session that we're just going to come back in and we're going to slice off or crop off that left part of the refrigerator. And then it's going to look like a normal proportion to the rest of the cabinet. So it's going to look, it's not going to look oversized or big jumbo sized. And we still leave in enough of the ice and water in the door that people know, oh, this is an upgrade, nice refrigerator. So we're adding value. So now the next step, hey, a lot of people spend time standing at the kitchen sink and doing dishes and cleaning and filling up glasses and so on. So that's an important place to try and show that experience, especially if we can look out the window and see nice things. So we want to draw attention to that. But in this case, we've still got a couple issues going on. The camera's still way too high, and we have distractions at these bottom corners, bottom left and bottom right. And we still have a lot of clutter. Now, I'll draw your attention to the rug. Rugs and towels I typically will remove. If they're nice white fluffy towels in the bathroom, I'll leave them on because that's generally not where we're going to focus towards. But we don't want to draw your attention down to the floor or cover up. Floors are very valuable. We spend a lot of money on hardwood floors and tile and those kind of things. So generally, unless it's a very complementary, like if it were a nice white fluffy rug that complemented the cabinets, generally we'll remove the throw rugs because we don't want contrasting colors on the outside edges. We want to bring it into the picture, not out of the picture. And then we just want to clean it up as much as we can. So now we're going to apply some science to our art. And so we're going to start using the rule of thirds. And on the right third, we have some additional cabinetry. So we've got a place for our eyes to start. And then it leads us and draws us into the picture. And our focal point in this case is that kitchen sink. And that's where we want to bring people's attention into. But we want to show the nice glass cabinetry and so on. And now the refrigerator's cleaned up, took all the extra clutter off of there, took the paper towels off and so on. So again, so this is my version of what I would have done differently from that photo. So now we're going to turn to the left where the other half of this galley kitchen is. And this is... oh, I take that back. We're actually going to jump into over the sink. We've got an upgrade kitchen pendant light with a kind of a waterfall glass on it. And this is a very nice feature. So anytime you get kind of unique features, so keep in mind that somebody's selling the same floor plan somewhere else and they haven't updated it, and it's got the old ugly dog dish ceiling lights. And so this house is $50,000 more, for instance. We want to show, well, yeah, because it's all been remodeled and updated and modern, and you're going to enjoy living here instead of just, utilitarian basic features in there. So anytime that we can show off upgrades. So now let's jump to the other half of the kitchen, the other half of the galley, and this is the realtor's photo to capture that center section. So because we don't have any windows competing on the light, we get a much better photo. So you notice the cabinets are white instead of yellow and so on, because we're not competing with a really bright light source and a really dark light source all in the same photo. Now, the downside is that we still do have some distractions here. So off to the left and off to the right are some very contrasting items that pull your eye out of the picture instead of into the picture. And then we've got a big blob of white on the in front of the stove, and then we've got some sanitary cleaning products on the countertop. So those things don't help. So this is where I gave the kind of instruction of, okay, this is how I would take the picture. I'd get rid of those competing things on those outside edges, draw your attention to this photo. So this is kind of a 1-point photo and brings your attention to the really nice range hood and the gas stove and so on, and just draws us in. So the realtor took this lesson, lowered his cell phone down, and got a really nice photo. Again, very usable. From a cell phone, decent, well balanced on exposure and so on. Could use a little brightening and shadow, so would benefit from a little bit of editing. But again, for just straight out of the camera, much, much better. So now we're level and square. We can start to see some lights underneath the cabinet, so we see some value there. So again, very nice job. And we start to see the little twinkle of the lights underneath the range hood, and we can see that there's, removable, vents up there. Again, high-end features. So I'm going to break the rules here a little bit. And I'm actually going to aim the camera down. So it's okay to break the rules now and then, but for the most part, follow the rules, and it'll help, again, get you more business and more cash flow. So in this case, this is a chef's dream. A 5-burner stove with an extra, elongated burner in the middle and a high heat output. Notice that we made the towel much, much smaller here on the bottom, compared to the previous photo. So I'd already, well, you saw the one with a really wide towel. But we're really getting the attention on the stove and again, chef's dream with, gas and 5-burner and high heat output and low storage shelf and so on, and lighting under the cabinets. And so really starting to show this off. So those details do matter. So, there are times where you want to just, do some angles in that. You just don't want to have other things outside. If I had pieces of the other edges of the countertop showing, if I had the grandfather clock in the background and really showed the odd angles, then it just wouldn't look nearly as good.